2023 officially coming to a close. Happy New Year to everyone. I'm going to give you my personal most anticipated films coming out this year. There's going to be a nice mix of some Oscar hopefuls in there and of course some horror movies. If you're interested in what my favorite movies of 2023 are, that will be a full podcast episode on the main show. That will also be available here on YouTube in mid-January, the week of January 14th. Make sure you check below so you can click on my link tree to subscribe to the podcast via whatever podcast platform you listen on. Before I give you my top 5, let me list some honorable mentions and what I affectionately call rounding out my top 10. Here's 5 honorables that I'm extremely excited about seeing this year, but they would not quite make my 5 most anticipated. Here they are. Alex Garland's Civil War. By the way, I did a trailer reaction for that one a couple weeks ago. I'll throw a tag up here somewhere for you. Love Lies Bleeding, directed by St. Maud filmmaker Rose Glass. Those 2 trailers got me super hyped for those movies, and that's why they're in my top 10 or so. Terrifier 3, Damien Leone. Revisiting Art the Clown. Come on. Challengers, the new romantic thriller starring Zendaya. I'm into it. Another one that got pushed back because of the SAG-AFTRA strike, by the way, which just increased my anticipation. And Parasite, Oscar-winning director Bong Joon-ho's next project, Mickey 17, starring Robert Pattinson, a sci-fi futuristic thriller. All right, with those honorable mentions out of the way, let's count down my top 5 most anticipated. Here we go. At number 5 is a sequel. We're getting a ton of sequels in 2024. I saw a list that somebody put on Twitter the other day that was like all the big budget sequels that are coming out, and it was like literally 30 of them. One of the ones that I am extremely excited about is my number 5 is Tim Burton's Beetlejuice 2. 1988's Beetlejuice, starring Michael Keaton, Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, and of course a young Winona Ryder, is one of my favorite 80s horror movies. It's like a gateway horror film. You can watch it with the family. You can watch it as a sicko, a horror fan. I absolutely love it. So of course, I'm excited for the sequel, a long-awaited sequel, like 35 years in the making. It's been rumored to be made over and over and over again in the last decade or so. It's finally happening. Not only the names I mentioned, but Jenna Ortega has been added to the mix. I love Tim Burton's aesthetic. He is one of the filmmakers that I've just been extremely loyal to my entire cinephile life. My number 4 is a movie that admittedly was pushed back because of SAG-AFTRA. It was supposed to come out in the fall of 2023 and was also expected to be a pretty big Oscars player. However, because of the strikes, it got pushed back, and now it's coming out this spring of 2024. I am, of course, talking about Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2. It stars one of my kings, Timothée Chalamet, and building on the world from the first Dune that was released kind of during that weird COVID period. This is such a fascinating world-building experience that Villeneuve has really taken on. We'll probably end up getting that 3rd film in this Dune trilogy as well. And I say give it all to me. I don't think it's on the level of like a Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I do think from a grand scale epic nature, he really is kind of diving into that same type of feeling that I remember having in the early 2000s when Peter Jackson did that trilogy as well. It's just so epic, so sweeping, and because of the strike and the delays, I cannot wait for this thing. My number 3 most anticipated film for 2024 is one that I know very, very little about, but it is a prequel, and it's called A Quiet Place Day One. A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2 were both in my top 5 movies of their respective years. However, they were both directed and written for the screen by John Krasinski. So I really trust this in his hands. However, he's not in the director's chair for Day One, but it is a prequel to the world that I have become so connected to because of his 2 films. Not only that, it stars Lupita Nyong'o, who I absolutely adore. Alex Wolff, of course, from Hereditary and many other things I also love in the horror genre. Really, all I know is that it tells the story of those aliens first coming to Earth and what leads up to eventually we see in A Quiet Place that came out in 2018. And I'm a fanboy for this franchise. It was also directed by Michael Sarnoski, who directed Pig, starring Nicolas Cage a few years ago, which was in my top 5 movies of that year also. So I am excited to see what he does next. This will be his sophomore effort. All right, I know I went pretty heavy-handed in terms of horror on this list. I don't know what to tell you guys. I'm the horror guy. Maxine, directed by Ty West. We're talking about trilogies earlier with Dune. And this is Ty West's kind of grindhouse 70s, 80s era trilogy. A throwback to the old wood paneling horror days. But what he did is he took that aesthetic and he really gave us some central characters and gave us people to root for, to care about, to connect to. And nobody did that better throughout this trilogy. I can only imagine will continue in Maxine than Mia Goth, an absolute divine, heavenly queen who is one of the best actresses of the last decade. I will be seated for any project she's involved in. I loved her in Infinity Pool last year, and I loved her in both of the previous Ty West films in this trilogy as well. Talking about X, and of course Pearl, which I thought was Oscar worthy in terms of her performance from Goth. But of course, the Academy's not going to look at it because it's a horror movie. And then what could I possibly be more excited about than Maxine and Mia Goth? Is it even possible? I guess so, because my number 1 most anticipated movie of 2024 is a bit of a bummer because it's not coming out until Christmas Day. It's not coming out for almost an entire year as I'm recording this video, but it's the next Robert Eggers directed film, Nosferatu. So we know the 1922 silent film that's an absolutely legendary piece of filmmaking starring Max Schreck is going to be the inspiration for Eggers' picture. I don't think it's going to be a remake because how do you really do that? But it's going to take Count Orlok's story and add a lot of depth and nuance to this story. And being an Eggers film, you got to imagine it's still going to be creepy. It's still going to make your skin crawl. Bill Skarsgård, who is kind of a mix between sexy and creepy anyway, is going to be playing Count Orlok. And I have to say, the casting is literally chef's kiss. I mean, I don't know how they could have gotten better with the casting. Lily Rose Depp is in the movie. Nicholas Hoult, who I absolutely adore, is signed on to do the film as well. Willem Dafoe will be getting weird and probably doing some crazy sick shit for Eggers again, much like he did in The Lighthouse. Nosferatu is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, vampire film, the 1922 one. And to have one of my favorite filmmakers take on that IP and do something and put his stamp on it, there's no way that this cannot be my most anticipated film of 2024. Now, with it having a Christmas Day release, if it gets pushed back, if it gets delayed, it's going to be in 2025, and then this list is null and void. There you go, guys. Obviously, I couldn't list them all, but those are some of my most anticipated films of next year. Also, don't forget, subscribe and look below to link to the actual audio podcast as well, because I will be doing my best movies of 2023 with my podcast partner and a special guest the week of January 14th. And we also have our Golden Peas Movie Awards, our fan-voted movie awards that we do every year, coming up. Voting starts that same week, and the broadcast will be in mid-February. I'm looking forward to that as well as we celebrate 2023 in film. What are your most anticipated movies of 2024? Did I list yours, or what did I forget? Please let me know down below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time in the garage.